My husband of 7 years demanded that we split all the household bills because he said he wouldn't support a gold-digging woman. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth when he cleared his throat in that particular way. You know the one. When someone's about to drop a bomb on your dinner and pretend it's casual conversation. So, I've been thinking, he said, not looking up from his perfectly seasoned chicken that I'd spent an hour preparing. Things need to change around here. I set down my fork carefully. 7 years of marriage had taught me to read the warning signs. The way he adjusted his collar, the slight pause before speaking, the laptop he'd positioned just within reach on the kitchen counter. What kind of changes? My voice came out steadier than I felt. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. Well, I've been doing some math, and frankly, this arrangement isn't fair to me anymore. What arrangement? This whole setup where I work my ass off every day while you— He gestured vaguely around our immaculate kitchen. Do whatever this is. The words hit like ice water. I'd left my marketing job 7 years ago when we got married. His idea, actually. A man should provide for his wife, he'd said back then. I want to take care of you. I'd been hesitant. I loved my career, but he'd been so insistent, so romantic about it. Now he was looking at me like I was some kind of parasite. I've created a spreadsheet, he continued, flipping open the laptop with the enthusiasm of someone presenting a brilliant business proposal. I've calculated all our monthly expenses. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, everything. From now on, we're splitting it 50-50. The screen showed a detailed breakdown of our life reduced to numbers. Mortgage, £2,947. Utilities, $340. Groceries, $580. Insurance, $420. The list went on and on, each item meticulously calculated. But I don't have a job, I said quietly. You asked me to quit, remember? He waved his hand dismissively. That was then. This is now. You're a smart woman. You can figure something out. I'm not running a charity here. I stared at him, this man I'd loved, whose socks I'd been washing, whose meals I'd been cooking, whose mother I'd been tolerating for 7 years, and felt something shift inside me, something cold and sharp and calculating. So let me understand this, I said, my voice taking on a tone I barely recognized. You want me to pay half of everything. Starting when exactly? Starting next month. He smiled, clearly pleased with himself. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. You've always been so practical. I looked at the spreadsheet again, noting every detail. The mortgage on the house I'd turned into a home, the utility bills for the electricity I used to iron his shirts, the grocery money for the food I planned, bought, and prepared. Okay, I said. He blinked, apparently surprised by how easily I'd agreed. Okay? Yes, you're absolutely right. If we're going to be roommates instead of husband and wife, we should split everything equally. I smiled, and something in my expression must have registered because he shifted uncomfortably. That's great. Honey, I'm glad you understand. But I could see it in his eyes. He'd expected a fight. Maybe tears, definitely begging. Instead, he got agreement, and it was clearly unsettling him. I picked up my fork and took another bite of the dinner I'd prepared. This is delicious, isn't it? I really outdid myself tonight. Yeah, it's good, he mumbled, suddenly focused intently on his plate. As I chewed, my mind was already working. If he wanted to play this game, I'd play it. But he'd just made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was the same woman who'd agreed to quit her job 7 years ago. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The next morning, I woke up at my usual time, 6:30. But instead of padding to the kitchen to start the coffee and lay out his clothes for work, I rolled over and went back to sleep. At 7:15, I heard his alarm go off. Then again at 7:25. By 7:30, I could hear him stumbling around the bedroom, clearly confused by the absence of his usual routine. Honey? His voice drifted from the kitchen. Where's the coffee? I pulled my pillow over my head and smiled. Let the games begin. 20 minutes later, he was back in the bedroom, half-dressed and agitated. What's going on? There's no coffee, no breakfast, and I can't find my blue shirt anywhere. I stretched lazily and looked at him with innocent confusion. Good morning to you, too. What's wrong? What's wrong? It's almost 8 o'clock and nothing's ready. Ready for what? I sat up, genuinely puzzled by his distress. Oh, you mean your stuff? But sweetheart, remember what you said last night? We're splitting everything 50-50 now. That means we each handle our own responsibilities. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. But you always make coffee. I make coffee for myself. You're welcome to make your own. I swung my legs out of bed and headed for my closet. Your blue shirt is in the laundry room. By the way, In the dirty clothes basket where you left it 3 days ago. But you always do the laundry. I do my laundry. Your clothes are your responsibility now. I pulled out a beautiful dress I hadn't worn in months, something I used to save for special occasions that never came. This arrangement was your idea, remember? Equal partners, equal responsibilities. I could practically see the gears grinding in his head as he tried to process this new reality. He'd wanted a business arrangement, and I was giving him exactly that. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, stomping toward the laundry room. "You're being petty." "I'm being practical," I called after him. "Just like you said I was." While he crashed around looking for clean clothes, I made myself a single cup of coffee in my favorite mug, the one he usually grabbed because it was bigger. I scrambled one egg, toasted one slice of bread, and sat down to eat in peaceful silence. He reappeared 20 minutes later in a wrinkled shirt that didn't match his pants, his hair still messy because he couldn't find the hair product I usually set out for him. "You look nice," I said pleasantly. "Very authentic." He grabbed his keys with unnecessary force. "This is insane. I'm going to be late for work." "Traffic's pretty bad around this time," I agreed. "You might want to leave a few minutes earlier tomorrow. Oh, and don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. We're out." "Pick up milk? That's your job." I looked at him with genuine surprise. "My job? I thought I didn't have a job, remember? Besides, you drink milk too. If you want it in the house, you'll need to contribute to making that happen." The look on his face was priceless, like he was finally understanding what 50-50 actually meant. After he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I sat back down with my coffee and pulled out my phone. Time to do some research. I started with my old LinkedIn profile, dormant for 7 years but still there. Then I opened a new document and began making lists. My skills, my contacts, my options. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, "Day 1 of independence." The house felt different without the weight of his expectations. Lighter somehow. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to complete his to-do list before he got home. Instead, I was making my own. 2 weeks into our new business arrangement, I discovered just how expensive 50-50 could be for him. I was folding my laundry when I noticed my favorite white blouse had turned a lovely shade of pink. Not the romantic blush pink you might choose deliberately, but the tragic pink that happens when someone throws a red sock into a white load. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch watching sports highlights. "We have a problem," I announced, holding up the ruined blouse. He barely glanced away from the TV. "What now?" "You damaged my property. This blouse cost $95 and now it's unwearable." "It's just a shirt," he shrugged. "Throw it out." "I will. Right after you reimburse me for it." That got his attention. "Reimburse you? For what?" "Property damage. You put your red gym shirt in with my whites despite the clear laundry basket separation system I established. Your negligence? Your responsibility." I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of the blouse from the store's website. $95. "This is insane. We're married. We're business partners now, remember? And business partners compensate each other for damages." I sat down across from him with my most reasonable expression. "Unless you're suggesting we go back to the old arrangement where we share everything?" The trapped look on his face told me everything I needed to know. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll pay for your stupid shirt." "Thank you, I'll take cash." Over the next few days, I implemented a comprehensive damage assessment system. When he left coffee rings on the dining room table, I'd spent hours refinishing, $15 wood restoration fee. When he used my expensive shampoo because he'd forgotten to buy his own, $12 replacement cost. When he ate the last of the Greek yogurt I'd specifically bought for my breakfast, $7.38, plus inconvenience fee for the extra trip to the store. I kept meticulous records in a little notebook I'd labeled partnership expenses. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I'd left work early from the part-time consulting job I'd finally landed and came home to grab some files I'd forgotten. As I approached the front door, I could hear him talking on the phone. "I know it's been tough, babe, but I'm working on it. The whole splitting expenses thing is going better than I expected." No, she's not suspicious at all. She actually agreed to it right away. "Yeah, I should be able to send you more money starting next month." I stood frozen on my own doorstep, key halfway to the lock. "I know you're struggling since the divorce, and I promised I'd take care of you. Look, once I get her to start paying half of everything, I'll have way more money to help with your rent and the kids' stuff." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about fairness or equal partnership. This was about funding his ex-girlfriend's life while keeping his wife as unpaid household labor. "She's been playing housewife for 7 years. His voice continued, dripping with contempt. It's about time she contributed something real. Besides, what's she going to do? Leave? She hasn't worked in years. She needs me more than I need her. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking with rage. Not just anger, pure, crystalline fury mixed with humiliation. How long had he been planning this? How long had he been talking about me like I was some pathetic dependent while secretly funneling money to another woman? I got back in my car and drove around the block 3 times before I trusted myself to walk through that door without doing something irreversible. When I finally entered, he was off the phone, acting like nothing had happened. "You're home early," he said casually. "Forgot some paperwork." My voice sounded normal, which surprised me. "Hey, I've been thinking about our partnership arrangement." He looked up warily. "Yeah? I think you're absolutely right. If we're going to be true business partners, we need to do this properly." I smiled, and something in my expression made him lean back slightly. "I mean really properly. Full accountability, complete transparency, the works." "What do you mean?" "Well, for starters, I think we should each contribute our partnership agreements to writing. Spell out exactly what each partner is responsible for, what the financial obligations are, maybe even include some performance metrics." The color drained from his face. "That seems a little extreme." "Extreme? For business partners?" I tilted my head, studying him like he was a fascinating specimen. "I thought you'd appreciate the professional approach. After all, if we're going to be partners, we should treat it like any other business relationship. Don't you think?" He mumbled something about thinking about it and retreated to his office. I went to the kitchen and opened my notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "Partnership Dissolution Planning." The doorbell rang at 8:30 on a Saturday morning, which could only mean one thing. His mother had arrived unannounced, as was her cherished tradition. I answered the door in my pajamas and robe, coffee mug in hand, completely unbothered by my appearance. The old me would have panicked, thrown on real clothes, and spent 10 minutes apologizing for the state of the house. "Oh," she said, taking in my casual attire with obvious disapproval. "You're not dressed." "Good morning to you, too. Come in." I stepped aside, genuinely curious to see her reaction to the current state of our home. She walked into the living room and stopped dead. His side of the room was a disaster zone. Dirty clothes draped over furniture, takeout containers stacked on the coffee table, newspapers scattered across the floor. My side was immaculate, with fresh flowers and neatly arranged books. "What in heaven's name happened here?" she gasped. "Oh, that's your son's area. I only manage my own space now." I settled into my clean chair and sipped my coffee peacefully. "Where is he?" "Still sleeping. He was up late trying to figure out how to work the washing machine." Her face turned an interesting shade of purple. "You didn't help him? Why would I? He's a grown man." I studied her over my mug. "Would you like some coffee?" "I have enough for one more cup." "This is outrageous." She marched toward the kitchen, and I heard her sharp intake of breath as she discovered the division there too. One side spotless, the other looking like a tornado had hit it. She stormed back, her perfectly coiffed hair practically vibrating with indignation. "What kind of wife are you? This house is a disaster." "Actually, half the house is a disaster. My half is quite nice." I gestured around my pristine living space. "The disaster half belongs to your son. Don't be ridiculous. A wife's job is to maintain the home." I set down my coffee and looked at her with genuine curiosity. "According to whom?" "According to common decency. To the way things are supposed to be." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with a folder I'd prepared for exactly this moment. "You might want to see this before you continue." I handed her the printed copy of his spreadsheet, the one where he'd calculated every household expense and declared that I needed to pay half because I was, in his words, freeloading. She stared at the document, her mouth opening and closing silently. "Your son decided we should be business partners instead of husband and wife," I explained pleasantly. "Equal financial responsibilities, equal domestic responsibilities." This was entirely his idea. But you're supposed to what? Pay half the bills and do all the housework?" I laughed, and the sound was lighter than I'd felt in months. "That's not a partnership. That's a scam." She looked around again, as if seeing the situation with new eyes. "He didn't mean—" "Oh, he meant it. He spent considerable time creating this spreadsheet. He was very proud of his mathematical skills." I took the document back from her trembling hands. "Would you like me to show you the part where he calculated that my 7 years of unpaid household management was worth $0? The fight went out of her all at once. She sank onto his dirty couch, apparently not caring about the takeout containers. I raised him better than this, she whispered. Did you? I asked, not unkindly, because this level of entitlement doesn't develop overnight. Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced his arrival. He appeared in rumpled pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles, clearly unprepared for his mother's visit. Mom, what are you doing here? I came to see why your wife isn't taking care of you properly, she said flatly. Instead, I find out you've turned your marriage into some kind of business arrangement. He shot me a look that could have melted steel. She's been filling your head with nonsense. Nonsense? His mother held up the spreadsheet. You documented it yourself. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I watched him realize that he couldn't deny what was written in his own hand, couldn't dismiss his mother's concerns the way he'd been dismissing mine. Look, it's complicated, he finally said. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it, his mother demanded. He looked between us, clearly calculating his options. I just think we should both contribute equally. What's wrong with that? Nothing, I said cheerfully. Which is why I've been contributing exactly equally. I pay my half of everything and take care of my half of everything. Your half is your responsibility. His mother looked around the room again, really looked. And I could see her finally understanding the full picture. I think, she said slowly, I should go. That's probably best, I agreed. This is between business partners now, not family. She stood up, brushed off her skirt, and walked to the door without another word. Before leaving, she turned back to her son. You made this bed, she said quietly. Now you get to lie in it. After she left, he turned on me with a fury I'd never seen before. How dare you embarrass me like that in front of my mother? I looked at him calmly. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself. I just refused to clean it up. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was updating my resume for the third time in 2 weeks. I'd been applying for entry-level positions, assuming my 7-year gap had made me unemployable in any meaningful way. Is this really the marketing genius who used to run circles around all of us in Professor Martinez's strategy class? The voice was familiar, warm, and filled with the kind of confidence I'd forgotten I used to possess. This is she, I said cautiously. It's Jake from college. We worked on that impossible campaign project together junior year, the one where we had to rebrand that failing restaurant chain. The memory hit me like a wave. Late nights in the library, whiteboards covered with brand positioning diagrams, the thrill of solving impossible problems with nothing but creativity and determination. I'd love that version of myself. Jake, how did you get this number? I have my ways. Actually, I've been trying to track you down for months. I'm heading up marketing for a consulting firm now, and I've got a problem that has your name written all over it. I haven't worked in 7 years, I said automatically, the disclaimer I'd been giving every potential employer. So? You haven't had a lobotomy. Your brain is still in there, right? I laughed despite myself. Last I checked. Good enough for me. We've got a client who's hemorrhaging customers, and 3 different agencies have failed to figure out why. I need someone who can think differently, see patterns other people miss. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded exactly like the person I used to be. Jake, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not exactly interview ready. I'd need time to prepare, to brush up on current trends. Skip the interview. I've already seen your work. Remember that portfolio from senior year? I kept a copy. Still reference it sometimes. His voice turned serious. Look, I know you disappeared after college, got married, did the domestic thing, but talent doesn't expire. If anything, life experience probably made you sharper. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. By the end, I had a consulting contract that paid more per month than my husband made in 2. There's one condition, Jake said as we wrapped up. I'm going to need you to travel occasionally. Client meetings, strategy sessions. That going to be a problem? I looked around my half of the immaculate house, then at the disaster zone that was his half. Not at all. The first client meeting was a revelation. I walked into a conference room full of expensive suits and felt something click back into place. A part of myself I'd packed away so long ago I'd forgotten it existed. So, the client said, sliding a folder across the table, 3 agencies have told us we need to completely rebrand, change our entire business model. What do you think? I spent 20 minutes reviewing their materials, then looked up. I think those agencies were trying to justify their fees instead of solving your problem. The room went quiet. Your brand isn't the problem. Your customer service is. Specifically, your phone system routes people through 7 different departments before they reach someone who can actually help them. Your customers aren't leaving because they don't like your product. They're leaving because buying from you is exhausting. I spent the next hour walking them through a complete customer journey analysis I'd improvised on the spot. By the time I finished, the CEO was taking notes. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "When can you start?" Jake walked me out afterward, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'd forgotten how good you were at cutting through the noise." "I'd forgotten too," I admitted. He stopped walking and looked at me seriously. "Can I ask you something? Why did you stop? You were the most ambitious person in our graduating class. I always figured you'd end up running your own agency by now." The question hit harder than I expected. "I got married. My husband wanted me to focus on the home. And you wanted that too?" I opened my mouth to give the automatic response I'd been giving for 7 years. That it had been my choice. That I'd wanted to be a supportive wife. But standing there in my professional clothes, fresh from solving a problem that had stumped 3 established agencies, I couldn't make the words come. "I don't think what I wanted mattered much," I said finally. Jake's expression darkened. "That's not okay." "No," I agreed, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "It's not." He walked me to my car, and as I drove home, I felt like I was seeing everything with new eyes. The strip malls and office buildings I passed weren't just scenery anymore. They were possibilities, opportunities, places where my skills mattered, where my ideas had value. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment before going inside. The house looked different somehow. Smaller. Less like a castle and more like what it actually was, just a building. Inside, I found him at the kitchen table with his laptop, surrounded by bills and that infamous spreadsheet. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. "Productive." I set my purse down and loosened my blazer. "I got a consulting contract. Good money." Now he looked up. "That's great. How much money?" I named the figure, and his eyes widened. "That's more than I make." "I know." I smiled. "Looks like I won't have any trouble paying my half of the bills after all." The expression on his face was complicated. Surprise, worry, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Something that looked almost like fear. For the first time in 7 years, I understood why. She showed up on a Saturday afternoon while he was at his brother's house, probably complaining about his unreasonable wife who dared to expect equal treatment in her own home. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find a woman about my age with tired eyes and highlighted hair that needed touching up. She was pretty in a worn-down way, like someone who'd been fighting battles for too long. "You must be his wife," she said, as if that explained everything. "I am, and you must be the ex-girlfriend he's been financially supporting." I leaned against the door frame casually. "Would you like to come in?" Her confident expression faltered. What?" "Come in," I repeated, stepping aside. "We should talk." She followed me into the living room, clearly thrown by my calm demeanor. I could practically see her recalibrating, trying to figure out why I wasn't screaming or throwing things. "Look," she started, perching nervously on the edge of the couch. "I know this is awkward, but I'm worried about him. He's been so stressed lately, and I think you don't understand how hard he works." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I settled into my chair with a cup of tea I'd been drinking when she arrived. "He works very hard to maintain 2 households on one salary." The color drained from her face. "I'm sorry? He's been sending you money, hasn't he? That's why he suddenly decided we needed to split all our expenses 50-50. More money for him means more money for you." She started to deny it, but I held up my hand. "Before you waste energy on lies, you should know I've seen the evidence." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd prepared weeks ago. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, screenshots of text messages I'd found on the phone bill, credit card charges to a florist in her neighborhood. "February 14th, I said, pointing to one charge. "Roses delivered to your address. March 23rd, money transfer for $400 with the memo rent help. April 15th, another transfer for $600 with the memo kids need shoes." She stared at the papers like they might catch fire. "How did you get these?" "I'm not stupid, despite what both of you apparently think." I sat back down, watching her face cycle through shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been admiration. "He said you didn't know," she whispered. "He said a lot of things. That I was lazy, that I contributed nothing, that I was lucky he kept me around." I sipped my tea calmly. "Did he mention that I've been running his household for 7 years without pay while he convinced me I was worthless?" Her mouth opened and closed silently. "Here's what's interesting," I continued conversationally. "You're not the villain here. You're just another woman he's manipulating. He told you I was some kind of gold digger, didn't he? Made you think you were saving him from a terrible marriage?" She nodded reluctantly. "Just like he made me think I was lucky to have a man who wanted to take care of me." Just like he probably told his first ex-wife that she was the problem too. First ex-wife? Her voice was barely audible. Oh, yes. Did he not mention her? Interesting. I leaned forward slightly. Let me guess. He told you that you were different from all the other women who didn't understand him? The recognition in her eyes was painful to watch. He has a pattern, I said gently. Find a woman who needs something. Security, financial help, validation, promise to provide it, then slowly make her believe she's the problem when things go wrong. But he loves me, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Does he? Or does he love having someone who depends on him? I pulled out one more document, a printout of his call logs. Look at this. Every time he calls you is when he's angry with me. You're not his girlfriend. You're his emotional escape valve. She studied the evidence, and I could see the exact moment when everything clicked into place. Oh God, she breathed. I'm such an idiot. No, you're not. You're a single mother trying to survive, and he offered you a lifeline. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. We sat in silence for a moment, two women who'd been played by the same man in different ways. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I'm going to stop paying for his games, both literally and figuratively. I gathered up the papers. What are you going to do? She looked around my beautiful home, the home I'd created and maintained while believing I was worthless. And something hardened in her expression. I'm going to stop taking his money, she said firmly. I've been applying for better jobs anyway. I don't need his charity. Good for you. She stood up, then paused at the door. Aren't you angry? At me, I mean? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, I would have been furious. I would have blamed you for everything, probably would have fought to win him back. I smiled, and it felt genuine. Now I just feel sorry for whoever he targets next. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my perfectly organized living space. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. I'd spent 7 years believing I needed to fight for scraps of affection from a man who was giving the best parts of himself to someone else. Now I understood the truth. There were no best parts. There was just manipulation, skillfully applied to whoever was most vulnerable. The most empowering part wasn't exposing him. It was realizing I didn't want to win him back. I wanted something so much better. The legal papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who looked apologetic about the whole thing. I signed for them with the same calm I'd been cultivating for months, then sat at my kitchen table to read what my husband thought was his nuclear option. Petition for exclusive use and occupancy of marital residence, the header read. Below that, in legal language that couldn't quite hide the desperation, he was asking a judge to remove me from my own home because I was creating an uninhabitable living situation and preventing him from peaceful enjoyment of his property. I had to laugh. After 7 years of free housekeeping, cooking, and emotional labor, he was now claiming I was the problem because I'd stopped providing those services for free. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend preparing, and by Monday night, I had 3 binders full of evidence that told a very different story than the one he was trying to sell. Tuesday morning, I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd bought for client meetings, and arrived at the courthouse early. He was already there with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man in his 50s who clearly thought this was going to be a straightforward case of removing an uncooperative wife. When the judge called our case, I stood with my own representation, a sharp family law attorney who'd taken one look at my evidence and agreed to work with me immediately. Your Honor, his lawyer began, my client is simply asking for the right to live peacefully in his own home. His wife has created an impossible situation, refusing to maintain the household and creating deliberate chaos. The judge, a woman in her 60s with intelligent eyes, looked at me. How do you respond to these allegations? My lawyer stood. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation that tells the complete story. Mrs. He glanced at me and I nodded. Has maintained detailed records of the marital arrangement her husband demanded. We presented everything chronologically. The original spreadsheet where he calculated that my 7 years of household management was worth nothing. Bank records showing money transfers to his ex-girlfriend. The written log I'd kept of every time he'd expected me to clean up after him, while simultaneously demanding I pay half of everything. Furthermore, my lawyer continued, Mrs. has been gainfully employed for the past 2 months and is fully capable of meeting her financial obligations. The issue isn't her inability to contribute. It's her husband's expectation that she should pay equally while providing all domestic labor for free. The judge studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up, Her expression was not sympathetic to his cause. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said to his lawyer. "Your client decided unilaterally that his wife should pay 50% of all household expenses, despite having been out of the workforce for 7 years at his request." "Well, Your Honor, circumstances change." "Indeed they do." The judge's voice was dry. "And it appears circumstances have changed in ways your client didn't anticipate." She turned to him directly. "Sir, did you create this spreadsheet?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but... And did you present it to your wife as a non-negotiable change to your marital arrangement?" "I thought we should both contribute equally." "I see. And in your definition of equal contribution, your wife would pay half of all expenses and continue to provide all domestic services?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Your Honor," his lawyer interjected, "my client simply wants to live in his own home without harassment." Harassment. The judge looked at my documentation again. "I see here that your client's wife has been paying her agreed-upon 50% of all expenses while maintaining only her own living spaces and belongings. How exactly is adhering to his own proposed arrangement considered harassment?" I watched his lawyer realize they were losing badly. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I see evidence that your client has been financially supporting another woman throughout this marriage, including during the period when he was demanding his wife contribute more financially." The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of his lawyer shuffling papers desperately. "Petition denied," the judge said firmly. "Not only is there no basis for removing Mrs. from her marital home, but the evidence suggests that she has been remarkably accommodating to an arrangement that was heavily biased against her interests." As we walked out of the courthouse, his lawyer was already talking about appeal options, but I could see in his eyes that he knew it was over. You can't win a case when all the evidence proves you're exactly as unreasonable as your opponent claims. Outside, he caught up with me in the parking lot. "This isn't over," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Yes, it is." I looked at him calmly. "You wanted to play hardball, remember? You thought you could scare me into going back to being your unpaid servant. Instead, you just proved to a judge exactly what kind of man you are. I never meant for it to go this far." "Of course you didn't. You meant to get your way without consequences, like always." I opened my car door. "But actions have consequences now. Maybe it's time you learned that." As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The solid satisfaction of being completely, legally, unquestionably right. For the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't just surviving his games. I was winning them. He left the day after the court hearing, claiming he needed space to think after his humiliating legal defeat. I watched him pack a suitcase with the same detachment I might feel watching a stranger load their car. "I'll be staying at my brother's for a while," he announced, as if this was some great sacrifice he was making for our relationship. "Okay," I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing client proposals. "Okay, that's all you have to say? What would you like me to say?" I glanced at him briefly. "You're an adult. You can stay wherever you want." The look on his face suggested he'd expected tears, begging, promises to change. Instead, he got the same mild interest I might show a weather report. After he left, I walked through the house slowly, really seeing it for the first time in months. Without his constant mess, his complaints, his heavy presence sucking the energy out of every room, the space felt transformed, lighter, like it could breathe again. I made myself dinner, just for me, exactly what I wanted, and ate it while watching a documentary he would have hated. Then I took a long bath with expensive bath salts, read until midnight, and slept diagonally across the entire bed. I woke up the next morning feeling more rested than I had in years. Work became my sanctuary. The consulting firm Jake ran had a collaborative, energetic atmosphere that reminded me why I'd loved marketing in the first place. Ideas mattered there. Solutions were celebrated. Nobody questioned my competence or made me feel like I should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute. "You've been different lately," Jake mentioned over coffee after a particularly successful client presentation. "More confident. More yourself, I guess." "I feel more like myself," I admitted. "It's amazing how much mental energy gets freed up when you're not constantly defending your right to exist." "Is that what it was like? At home?" I considered the question. Jake and I had started having these conversations more frequently. Honest talks about life, dreams, the paths we'd taken, and the ones we wished we had. He was a good listener, never offering unwanted advice or trying to fix things that weren't his to fix. "It was like living with a critic who never took a day off," I said finally. "Everything I did was wrong, insufficient, or somehow selfish. I spent so much energy trying to anticipate his complaints that I forgot I was allowed to have opinions of my own. That sounds exhausting. It was. I didn't realize how exhausting until it stopped. Jake studied me over his coffee cup. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? The question surprised me with its directness. Yes, I said, and meant it. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Good. You deserve that. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in ages. I called my sister, the one who'd stopped visiting because she couldn't stand watching what I'd become. I was wondering when you'd finally call, she said without preamble. I heard through the grapevine that you'd grown a spine. News travels fast. Are you kidding? The whole family's been waiting for you to wake up. We just didn't know how to tell you without making things worse. We talked for 2 hours, and I realized how much I'd missed her wit, her honesty, her complete intolerance for self-pity. By the end of the call, we'd made plans for her to visit the following weekend. Fair warning, she said before hanging up. I'm bringing wine and terrible movies, and we're going to dissect every bad decision you've made for the past 7 years. I can't wait. The house felt different with him gone. Not empty, spacious. I rearranged furniture, hung artwork I'd been meaning to display, played music as loud as I wanted. I cooked elaborate meals just because I enjoyed cooking when it wasn't an obligation. I started a garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted to do, but never found time for when every moment was dedicated to maintaining his comfort. 3 weeks into his absence, he called. I think I've had enough space, he announced, as if he'd been doing me a favor. I'll be home tomorrow. This is your home too, I said neutrally. You don't need my permission to be here. Right, good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Reasonable. I almost laughed. He still thought this was about him teaching me a lesson, that his absence was punishment I should be eager to see end. He had no idea that his leaving had been the best 3 weeks I'd had in years. I'll see you tomorrow then, I said, and hung up before he could say anything else. I spent that evening looking around my peaceful, organized, joyful home and preparing myself for the return of chaos. But something had fundamentally changed during his absence. I'd remembered who I was without him, and that person was someone I actually liked. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going back to being the woman who'd accepted crumbs and called it a feast. He came home looking like a man who'd been hit by a truck. Gone was the cocky confidence he'd worn when he left. Instead, he dragged himself through the front door like someone carrying invisible weights. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner for one, when he appeared in the doorway. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he had the general appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. We need to talk, he said without preamble. About what? I continued chopping vegetables, not bothering to look up. About us. About this whole mess. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd presented his infamous spreadsheet months ago. I've been doing a lot of thinking. That's nice. She left me, he said quietly. Said she didn't want to be with someone who treated his wife the way I treated you. I paused my chopping for just a moment, then resumed. How unfortunate for you. That's it? That's all you have to say? I set down my knife and finally looked at him. What I saw was a broken man, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where my feelings for him used to live. What would you like me to say? That I'm sorry she finally saw who you really are? That I'm pleased you got a taste of your own medicine? I shrugged. I honestly don't care enough about your relationship with her to have an opinion. He flinched like I'd slapped him. How can you be so cold? Cold? I considered this. I'm not cold, I'm just done. Done with what? Done with caring about your feelings while you ignore mine. Done with making your problems my responsibility. Done with accepting scraps and calling it love. I turned back to my cooking. I'm done with you. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of 7 years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. I want to fix this, he said finally. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But we can work through this, right? People change. I can change. I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. It wasn't bitter or angry, just genuinely amused by the absurdity of the situation. Do you remember what you said when you wanted me to quit my job? I asked. What does that have to do with anything? You said a real man takes care of his wife. You said you wanted to provide for me, protect me. You made it sound romantic, noble even. I moved to the stove, still not looking at him. Do you remember what you said when I told you I missed working? He was quiet. You said I was being selfish, that a good wife supports her husband's dreams instead of chasing her own fantasies. You made me feel guilty for wanting something beyond your kitchen. I was wrong about that. Were you? Or are you just saying that because your backup plan fell through? I turned to face him fully. Because the thing is, I don't think you were wrong back then. I think you meant every word. Just like you meant every word when you called me a freeloader who needed to start paying her fair share. But you've learned that actions have consequences. That's not the same as changing who you are, fundamentally. I leaned against the counter, studying him like a specimen under a microscope. You didn't want to fix our marriage when you were getting everything you wanted from it. You want to fix it now because you're getting nothing. That's not true, isn't it? When I was doing all the housework and asking for nothing in return, was our marriage broken then? He opened his mouth, then closed it. When I was managing your entire life while you sent money to another woman, was that something that needed fixing? You don't understand the situation with her. Oh, I understand perfectly. She was your escape valve. When you were frustrated with me for being human instead of a perfect domestic appliance, you had somewhere else to put your attention. Someone who made you feel like a hero instead of holding you accountable. I walked to the table and sat across from him, close enough to see the panic starting to creep into his eyes. Here's what I think happened, I continued calmly. You got comfortable having two women competing for your attention. It made you feel powerful, important. But then I stopped competing, and she got tired of being with someone who treats women like disposable conveniences. Now you're alone, and suddenly our marriage is worth fighting for. I love you, he said desperately. I know I didn't show it, but I do love you. Maybe you do. In whatever way you're capable of loving someone. But here's the thing. I don't love you anymore. The words hung in the air between us, simple and final. I don't love the man who convinced me I was worthless while I made his life perfect. I don't love the man who called me a gold digger for wanting basic respect. And I definitely don't love the man who's only here because his plan B didn't work out. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But I can change, he said again, his voice cracking. I can be the man you need me to be. That's the problem, I said gently. I don't need you to be anything. I don't need you at all. I started packing the next morning while he was at work, methodically going through 7 years of accumulated life, and taking only what was truly mine. It was surprising how little that turned out to be. My clothes, my books, my laptop, a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. Everything else was either his or something we'd bought together back when together meant something. I was folding my last sweater when I heard his car in the driveway. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours, but apparently word travels fast when someone calls out of work to prevent their spouse from leaving. What the hell is this? He stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at the suitcases lined up on the bed. I'm moving out. I continued packing calmly. I found a furnished apartment downtown, close to work. You can't just leave. Actually, I can. I'm an adult with a job and my own income. Leaving is well within my capabilities. He rushed to the suitcase I was packing and started pulling clothes back out. Stop this. We need to talk about this rationally. I gently but firmly took my blouse back from his hands. There's nothing to discuss. I told you last night. I'm done. But you can't mean that. People don't just throw away 7 years of marriage. I'm not throwing it away. You already did that when you decided I was worth less than your ex-girlfriend. I zipped the suitcase closed. I'm just finally accepting what you taught me. He sat heavily on the bed, looking around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. Where will you go? What will you do? I told you, I have an apartment. As for what I'll do, I'll work, pay my bills, and live my life. You know, all the things I've been doing for the past few months. But what about us? What about this house? What about our life together? I paused in my packing and really looked at him. He seemed genuinely confused, as if he couldn't understand why actions might have permanent consequences. Our life together was me serving you, while you convinced me I should be grateful for the privilege. That's not a life I want anymore. I said I'd change, and I believe you think you would try. But change requires understanding what was wrong in the first place, and you still don't get it. I picked up the last suitcase. You think this is about the money you gave her? Or the chores you didn't do? Or the bills you wanted me to split? Those were just symptoms. Symptoms of what? Of the fact that you never saw me as an equal partner. I was either a service provider or a burden, depending on what you needed at the moment. That's not love. That's ownership. I walked toward the door, and he scrambled to follow me. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I stopped at the front door and turned back to him one last time. Do you know what you could have done 6 months ago that would have saved this marriage? He shook his head desperately. You could have said, thank you. Just once. You could have acknowledged that I'd been contributing to this relationship all along, even if it wasn't in the form of a paycheck. You could have treated me like a partner instead of like hired help who wasn't working out. I can say thank you now. It's too late. I opened the door. Thank you only matters when it's sincere, not when it's strategic. The moving truck was waiting outside. I'd arranged everything while he was at work, efficient as always. As the movers loaded my belongings, he stood on the front porch looking lost. How am I supposed to live here without you? He called out. The same way I lived here with you, I called back. You'll figure it out. The apartment was small but bright, with big windows and hardwood floors that reflected the afternoon sunlight. It came furnished with simple, clean furniture that was nothing like the heavy, expensive pieces we'd accumulated together. I loved it immediately. That first night, I sat on my new couch eating takeout from my favorite Thai place, the one he'd always complained was too spicy, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. No one was going to come home and criticize the way I'd arranged the throw pillows. No one was going to leave dirty dishes in my clean sink. No one was going to make me feel like I needed to justify my existence or apologize for taking up space. I was alone, and it was glorious. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. His name appeared on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I turned it off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, full of choices that were mine alone to make, full of a future that stretched ahead of me like an open road with no predetermined destination. For the first time in 7 years, I fell asleep without worrying about whether I'd done enough to earn my place in someone else's life. I was home. The first thing I did in my new apartment was buy flowers. Bright yellow sunflowers that I placed on the kitchen table where I could see them every morning. In my old life, flowers were an unnecessary expense, a frivolity that would have required justification and probably resulted in a lecture about fiscal responsibility. Now they were just beautiful, and that was reason enough. I spent the first weekend arranging my new space exactly how I wanted it. Books organized by subject instead of alphabetically because that's how my mind worked. Art hung at heights that made sense for my eyes, not his. The thermostat set to a temperature that kept me comfortable without needing to negotiate. Every small decision felt revolutionary. Work became even more fulfilling. Without the constant underlying stress of managing someone else's emotions, I found myself taking on bigger challenges, proposing bolder solutions. Jake noticed the change immediately. "You're on fire lately," he said after a presentation that had landed us a major new account. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it." "I'm sleeping better," I said, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I'd stopped living in a state of chronic anxiety, always braced for the next criticism or demand. Jake and I had started spending more time together outside of work. Dinner after long days, coffee on Saturday mornings, walks through the downtown farmers market. Nothing officially romantic, just the easy companionship of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. He never asked for more than I was offering, never made me feel like his attention came with strings attached. When I mentioned that I wasn't ready for anything serious, he'd simply nodded and said, "Fair enough, I like spending time with you regardless." It was the first time in years that a man had accepted my boundaries without arguing, pouting, or trying to convince me I was wrong about my own feelings. "You know what's weird?" I told him one evening as we walked through the park near my apartment. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to suddenly start keeping score of favors or making demands or telling me I'm not grateful enough." "That sounds exhausting," he said quietly. "Living like that. It was. I didn't realize how exhausting until it stopped. 3 months into my new life, my sister came to visit. She walked through my little apartment with obvious approval, taking in the flowers, the books arranged just how I liked them, the general atmosphere of contentment. "You look different," she said over wine and takeout. "Younger somehow." "I feel younger, like I got my life back." "Are you dating Jake officially yet?" "We're taking it slow, really slow." I curled up in my favorite corner of the couch. It's nice not having to rush into anything. He's not going anywhere, and neither am I. Good for you. After 7 years of walking on eggshells, you deserve someone who lets you set the pace. My phone had stopped ringing weeks ago. The desperate voicemails had tapered off, then stopped entirely. I'd heard through mutual friends that he was struggling with basic household tasks, living off frozen dinners and wearing wrinkled clothes. Part of me had expected to feel guilty about this, but I didn't. His incompetence wasn't my emergency anymore. "Do you miss it at all?" my sister asked. "The marriage, I mean. Not him specifically, but the idea of it." I thought about the question seriously. I miss the marriage I thought we had in the beginning, the partnership I thought we were building. But that was mostly in my head anyway. The reality was me doing all the emotional labor while pretending we were a team. And now? Now I actually am free to build the life I want instead of constantly adapting to someone else's vision of what my life should look like. That night, after my sister had gone back to her hotel, I sat in my quiet apartment and made a list of everything I'd accomplished since leaving. The client accounts I'd secured, the friendships I'd rekindled, the hobbies I'd rediscovered, the simple pleasure of making decisions without having to justify them to anyone. At the bottom of the list, I wrote, "Learned that I don't need someone else to complete me. I was never incomplete." Jake texted around 10, asking how the visit with my sister had gone. We exchanged a few messages, easy and comfortable, before saying goodnight. No drama, no hidden meanings, no walking on eggshells trying to avoid saying the wrong thing. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, building something at their own pace. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. My sister was right. I did look younger. But more than that, I looked like myself again. The woman who used to have opinions, dreams, boundaries. The woman who used to know her own worth. She'd been there all along, just buried under years of being told she was asking for too much by wanting basic respect. I turned off the lights and settled into my comfortable bed, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new choices that were entirely mine to make. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what came next. 6 months later, he appeared in the lobby of my office building like a ghost from a life I'd almost forgotten. I was coming back from lunch when I saw him sitting in one of the reception chairs, cleaned up and wearing a suit that actually fit properly. "Could we talk?" he asked, standing when he saw me. "Please, just 5 minutes." I looked at this man I'd once loved, once feared disappointing, once built my entire identity around pleasing, and felt nothing but mild curiosity about what had brought him here. 5 minutes, I agreed, leading him to a small conference room where we could speak privately. He looked nervous in a way I'd never seen before, like someone approaching a job interview for a position they desperately needed but probably wouldn't get. "You look good," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Happy. I am happy. I've been working on myself," he continued, the words tumbling out like he'd rehearsed them. "Therapy, anger management, the whole thing. I've learned a lot about how I treated you, how wrong I was about everything. That's good. Personal growth is important. I can cook now, really cook, not just microwave stuff. And I've been keeping the house clean, doing my own laundry. I even learned how to iron." He smiled hopefully. "I know that probably sounds pathetic, but I wanted you to know that I get it now. I understand what you were doing all those years." "Okay." My calm responses seemed to unnerve him. I could see him struggling to find the words that would create the reaction he wanted. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss us. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. I can be the partner you needed me to be. I can be better." I studied his face, looking for any trace of the feelings that used to live there. The love, the hope, the desperate need for his approval. They were gone, replaced by something much more valuable, indifference. "I believe you," I said simply. "You do?" His face lit up with hope. "Yes. I believe you've learned to cook and clean and manage your own life. I believe you've gained some insight into how poorly you treated me. I even believe you're sincere about wanting to change." But it doesn't matter. The hope died in his eyes as quickly as it had appeared. 6 months ago, hearing you say these things might have meant something to me. A year ago, I would have been grateful just to hear you acknowledge that I'd been contributing to our relationship all along. I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed. "But that woman is gone." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't need you to validate my worth anymore. I don't need you to appreciate my contributions or treat me like an equal partner. I already know I'm valuable, with or without your recognition." He stared at me like I was speaking in code. "The person you want back, the woman who would be grateful for crumbs of respect, who would rebuild her entire life around your improved behavior, she doesn't exist anymore. I outgrew her. But if I've changed, you probably have, at least somewhat. But here's the thing you still don't understand. This was never really about you changing. It was about me realizing that I didn't need you to." I stood up, signaling that our conversation was over. "I have a life now that makes me genuinely happy. Work that challenges me, friends who respect me, choices that are entirely my own. I wake up every morning excited about the day ahead instead of anxious about what I might do wrong. But we could have that together now. We could be real partners." "We could be," I agreed, but I don't want to be. Not with you, not with anyone who I'd have to train to see my humanity. I'd rather be alone and happy than partnered and constantly proving my worth. He looked devastated, like someone who just realized they'd lost something irreplaceable. Is there anything I can say? Anything I can do? You can be happy for me, I said gently. You can understand that this isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about me choosing a life where I don't have to fight for basic respect. I walked him to the elevator, and as the doors opened, he turned back one last time. I really do love you, he said. I know you do, in whatever way you're capable of loving someone. But I love myself more now, and that makes all the difference. The elevator doors closed, and I watched the numbers light up as he descended back to whatever life he was building without me. I returned to my office, where Jake was waiting with coffee and the presentation materials for our 3 o'clock meeting. Everything okay? He asked, noting my thoughtful expression. Everything's perfect, I said, and meant it completely. That evening, I sat in my favorite corner of my apartment with a cup of tea and my journal, documenting the final chapter of a story that had taken me 7 years to finish writing. Outside my window, the city hummed with life and possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Dinner tomorrow? There's a new place I think you'd love. I smiled and typed back. I'd like that. Not because I needed him, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I genuinely enjoyed his company and chose to share my time with him. The difference was everything. I closed my journal and looked around my small, perfectly arranged apartment. Every item in it was there because I wanted it there. Every choice, from the sunflowers on my table to the book on my nightstand, reflected my preferences and no one else's. 7 years ago, I'd believed that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I'd thought partnership meant erasing your own needs to better serve someone else's. Now I understood that real love, for yourself and others, required the exact opposite. It demanded that you show up as your full, authentic self, and refuse to accept anything less than the same in return. I'd learned that I didn't need someone else to complete me, because I had never been incomplete. I'd learned that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made me feel lonely. Most importantly, I'd learned that my worth wasn't up for negotiation. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror one more time. The woman looking back at me was confident, content, and completely free. She knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. She was never settling for less again.